Scholars, it's Thursday. It's our last video of the week. I know you're so excited. I know that you're so excited. It's our last video of the week, so you can enjoy your weekend with your family. But I just want you to know that your teachers are so very proud of you for working so hard. I know this is different and it's new. It's new to everybody, but the responses that we're getting and your assignments you're turning in are amazing. Keep up the good work. You're doing so great. And again, we're just so super proud of you. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I let you guys know that first. Okay, so before we begin, as always, let's refresh our brains and remind ourselves what we learned about yesterday. Yesterday, we read a story about George Washington, right, our very first president. And we learned that a legend is a story that mixes together the truth and made-up stories, right? We also learned that in the legend, George Washington felt sorry for cutting down the cherry tree, right? He felt sorry. He was worried that he might be in trouble. And because he worried so much, he felt determined to tell the truth. He wanted to be honest, okay? And we learned that George Washington, he was an honest man, right? And people looked up to him. He was a good man. It takes a lot to tell the truth, but it's always the right thing to do. And he did the right thing by telling the truth, by coming forward and telling his dad that he was the one that cut down the cherry tree, right? So in our read aloud today, you will hear about events that took place a long time ago, okay? Can you say American Revolution with Mrs. G? Let's say that together. American Revolution. Okay, good. The American Revolution was the name of the war that George Washington fought because the people of the American colonies wanted their freedom from the King of England. Okay, so what was the name of the war that George Washington and fought for the colonies against England? What was that called? American Revolution. Good. So before George Washington became the first president of America, he was a leader, okay, in the American Revolution. Okay, he fought for the American colonies in the American Revolution, in the American Continental Army. Okay, George Washington was a very honest man. We knew that, but he was also very clever. Ooh, think about what that word might mean as Mrs. G is reading you this read aloud, because one of your assessments that you're going to have today has to do with the word clever. So as you're reading the story with Mrs. G, you're going to think about what clever might mean, okay? So I'll ask you that at the end of our story, okay? And so in this read aloud is about General George Washington and a man named Henry Knox, who worked under Washington. Okay, listen carefully for the clever way in which General George Washington and Henry Knox tricked the English army. So you're going to pay attention to how that happened, okay? So let me go ahead and share my screen with you, and we're going to get started on our read aloud today. And then after we do our read aloud, we'll go over some vocabulary that we learned, our new words, and then Mrs. G will go over what your assessments are for today. Okay? All right, here we go. All right, so we're still presidents and American symbols. We're going to be on that for a couple weeks. And this story, this read aloud is called A Clever General. A Clever General. Okay. Henry Knox was a clever man. Before the American Revolution began, he and his wife had owned a bookshop in the city of Boston, Massachusetts. Henry Knox had loved the quiet, peaceful life of a bookseller, but all that was in the past now. Henry Knox, bookseller, had become Colonel Henry Knox of the American Continental Army. He worked directly with General George Washington, another clever man who commanded that the army, and the two men had become great friends, okay? So here's George Washington, and here is Henry Knox, okay? You should recognize George Washington and Henry Knox, okay? And again, the word clever means smart. So you're gonna listen for ways that George Washington was smart, okay? All right, excuse me. At the Continental camp just outside Of the city of Boston, Henry Knox had a puzzled look on his face. When we say puzzled, it means that he was feeling unsure. Okay, he just didn't know how to feel. He was unsure. Looking at General Washington, he asked, "But sir, how can we keep the larger English army from marching out from Boston and destroying our soldiers here? We don't even have enough bullets or gunpowder for all our soldiers." If the English only knew. George Washington answered him, "Yes, Colonel, if they only knew, but they do not know. The English think we have more men than we really have. They do not know that many of those whom we do lack anything to shoot at them with, as you mentioned." Okay, even though the Continental soldiers had guns, they didn't have any gunpowder or bullets left. So they had guns, but they didn't have any gunpowder or any bullets to even use those guns. So we must make sure that they do not find out. Let them think we are stronger than we are, so that they will wish to stay comfortably in Boston through this long, cold winter, at least until we are ready for them. But in order for us to get ready, we need more gunpowder and bullets. Oh boy. Colonel Knox thought for a few moments and then smiled. "General," he asked, "would 50 cannons and the cannonballs and gunpowder to use with them help?" Oh. Washington looks startled, okay? When Mrs. G says that Washington looks startled, startled means surprised, okay? "Where could we get—" Then he stopped. A light of understanding shone in his eyes. "Fort Ticonderoga," he exclaimed. "Brilliant, Colonel. Now that we have captured Fort Ticonderoga from the English, we have captured their cannons too. You are to assemble a team of carefully chosen men. In the morning, you will leave to bring these cannons here. Travel as quickly as you can." Mrs. G said Fort Ticonderoga wrong earlier. I'm sorry, that's a tough word. Let's try to say that together. Fort Ticonderoga. Fort Ticonderoga. All right, I think I got it now. "Fort Ticonderoga from the English, we have captured their cannons too. You are to assemble a team of carefully chosen men. In the morning, you will leave to bring those cannons here. Travel as quickly as you can." So the Americans captured one of the English forts, okay? And they're going to get their cannons. Was that a clever idea? Was that clever? "Meanwhile, my job here will be to convince the English General Howe, that we are too strong for him to attack. I will order our men to build high mounds." Okay, when I say mounds, it means huge piles, and you can see huge piles of dirt in front of our camp. General Howe will not be able to see past the dirt. Then I will march our men up and down on either end. He will not know we are moving the same men from place to place. Instead, he will think we have more soldiers than we really do. By putting up the dirt mounds, we also will appear to be settling in for a long time. General Howe will think, those colonial soldiers are expecting to keep us trapped here in Boston. They are certainly sure of themselves. He may think that it would be better to leave Boston on board his ships rather than stay. If we can force the English out, we will be in charge of the harbor again. And unlike the English, we can bring in supplies from another American city on the coast, then move the supplies to our armies all across the countryside, because our friends there will help us. Okay, so the supplies that they talk about would include food, water, probably weapons, guns, right? Those are the supplies that they need. Washington went over the idea in his mind. It might work, he said. It must work. It did work. Colonel Knox and his men marched off through the cold New England winter and returned in a little less than 2 months with cannons and supplies. Okay, so here's the path. You can see this is Fort Ticonderoga. Okay, you said it right this time. Fort Ticonderoga, and this is Boston. Okay, so it did work. They had loaded these things into carts and used huge, heavy bulls called oxen to pull the carts. back to Washington's camp outside of Boston. When they arrived, the waiting American soldiers sent up a mighty cheer. Hearing the noise, Washington came out of his tent, seeing Henry Knox riding his horse at the head of the line of men, oxen, and supplies. Washington stepped forward to greet him. "Welcome back, Colonel. I'm glad to see you, and our cannons." So you can see the cannon right here. If you don't know what a cannon is, if you look right here, that's what a cannon is, okay? Knox climbed down from his horse, turned, and saluted. "Thank you, sir. It is good to see you too, and to know that I will not have to spend another night on the march. And I have additional good news. We have also brought enough gunpowder and bullets so that our soldiers will finally have something to fire out of their gun barrels." Over in Boston, the English guards heard the shouts of joy too, and ran to tell General Howe. "Something is going on, General, but we cannot see what it is because of the dirt mounds the colonists built." Later that same day, however, General Howe looked up to see 59 cannons aimed his way from on top of the dirt mounds. Now, he thought, there is no way to safely attack Washington and his men. Of course, he did not know that he might have done that successfully any time in the 2 months it had taken Henry Knox to bring the cannons. Soon afterward, the English left Boston. The plan of Washington and Knox had worked. Afterward, several things changed in important ways. First, the city of Boston was back in American hands. So England was no longer in charge of the city. Americans were. This was great news for the people there, and it also made Americans throughout the 13 colonies think, if we are strong enough to force English soldiers out of Boston, maybe we can win our freedom after all. Though some American colonists remained loyal to England and chose to lead with General Howe, many Americans who had been afraid before came forward to help. They had begun to hope that they really could defeat the English. This is the map of the American colonies, okay? The second change was that George Washington had learned something important. The English army almost always wins when they fight on an open battlefield. From now on, we will attack and then quickly move away to attack another place. Or we will trap them up on the coast as we did in Boston. If we can keep them cooped up in coastal areas, meaning by the water, so areas by the water, they cannot come inland to attack us. If they cannot attack us, they cannot beat us. If they cannot beat us, they will grow tired of this war and leave us in peace. There was a third change too. Washington called in Colonel Knox and told him, "Congratulations, Henry. I am making you a general. I am putting you in charge of all of our cannons, not just the ones you brought from Fort Ticonderoga." So, who has more authority, a general or a colonel? Do you know? Think about it. George Washington and Henry Knox, the wealthy farmer from Virginia and the bookseller from Boston, became lifelong friends. General Knox helped General Washington win the American Revolution. A few years later, when Washington became president, he asked Henry Knox to become America's first Secretary of War, okay, which is a person who helps the president keep soldiers and sailors ready in case there should be another war. However, having fought one war already, the two friends worked together and made a wonderful peace instead. Okay, so there you go. That was a lot to learn, lots of new words, lots of strange long words. Even Mrs. G had trouble pronouncing them. All right, so you are supposed to think of ways that General George Washington and Henry Knox tricked the English army, okay? So I want you to go ahead and share that with somebody, your Think, Pair, Share person. If nobody is around you, it's okay. You can just think about it in your brain. What are some ways that General George Washington and Henry Knox tricked the English army, okay? All right, and then we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna go over our new vocabulary words that we heard in our story. Okay, you might recognize some of them that you've heard them before. So the first one is supplies. We have school supplies, right, that we use in our classroom, okay? Supplies are just resources that are available to use, okay? Resources that are available to use, okay? Just like in our classroom, we have scissors that you can use or available. We got pencils, we have markers and crayons. Those are considered supplies, things that you can use, okay? And we heard the word general. And general is an army officer who is in charge of the army, okay? An army officer who is in charge of the army. It's called a general. And this is colonel. It looks different. It doesn't look like the word colonel, right? But it is. It's pronounced colonel. And a colonel is an army officer who answers to a general. An army officer who answers to a general. And this word, clever. Clever means smart, which all of you are very clever. Okay, and this one is captured. And when somebody says they captured somebody, that means that they took control of a person, thing, or area. They took control of a person, thing, or area. And that was it. That was our last one. So your assessment for today, you have 3 things to do, but they're pretty easy, okay? So your first question is, who was in charge of the Continental Army in the beginning of the read aloud? So in the beginning, who was in charge of the Continental Army in the beginning of the read aloud? Was it General George Washington, or was it Colonel Henry Knox? Which one was it? And you're just gonna write which one it was on a piece of paper, okay? Your second question for your assessment is, whose army was larger? Whose army was larger? Was it General George Washington's army or General Howe's army? Whose was larger? And then the last question that you're going to do is you are going to draw a picture of what it means or what it looks like to be clever. Okay, Mrs. G told you what the word clever means, and you're just going to draw a picture of what that might look like. Okay, draw a picture of what that might look like. So you have those 3 questions, okay? And then you're going to send them over to your teacher, okay? Your normal homeroom teacher, all right? All right, that is it for today. I hope that you enjoyed your lessons. I hope you have a wonderful weekend and that you'll be back ready on Monday to learn some more, all right? All right, Mrs. G will talk to you later. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.